Okay, aloha everybody, and welcome to our third presentation of this week. Monday we had our Hernan Castro of mushrooms with the Desert Alchemist. If you missed that, it's archived, right, Katie? Where's it archived, Katie?
It's on our YouTube channel, Hawaii Farmers Union United on YouTube.
Great, highly recommended. And then there's a hemp panel with Lizzie Knight last night. That was wonderful with those folks. Geez, that was really great. And then tonight, of course, is soil health, and with Bob Schaefer, Bobby the Schaefer. And we're gonna continue this every week except for Thanksgiving week. Next week we have a wonderful Monday with Charles Tresteter. Actually, we're going to be at Charles's place, Chef Mark McDowell and I. And Charles is growing the mushrooms to where Chef is going to harvest them right there and cook a dish. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And then the third person of that panel is going to be Irene Antoinez out of Russia. So she's an amazing mushroom artist. So stay tuned for that for next Monday. And then Tuesday, we have a hemp panel again with our rock star Gail Baber talking about the economics and the rules of hemp production. And then Wednesday night, Drake Weinert, our East Hawaii chapter president, will be speaking about Korean natural farming practices, and that's soil health night. But here we are tonight with our in-house agronomist, I like to call him. He's a dear friend of mine. I've known Bobby Butts since Bobby 1998 at Acres USA we met. And it's really a wonderful thing to hear this man talk about soil and soil health. I've learned so much from him. He's spoken at our body and soil conferences here a number of years here on Maui when we had Maui Aloha Aina Association. And that's what birthed Hawaii Farmers Union, because we wanted to get a national voice in here that actually values soil health. So soil health is a big thing for us here at Hawaii Farmers Union. It's a big part of our mission. And as a matter of fact, Bob is going to be on island next week to go over to where we were going to hold our physical convention this year, but because of the variant, we weren't able to. But we did plant a cover crop and at Bobby Paia's farm. And we're going to go there next Tuesday. Bob's going to be in on Maui, and we're going to roll and crimp that cover crop. And it's basically let me show you real quick to show you what it's going to look like. The rolling and crimping of the cover crop looks like this. And with that, we're going to have a backhoe trench dug right next to it. So this way Bob can talk about what it looks like when it's rolled and crimped, and what the soil looks like. And one thing I love about Bobby is that he's able to see what he's looking at when he is addressing soil health. And so that is really a big deal for us, because we're working with, through my position on the Board of Agriculture, we've had the agricultural sector at the table, and we're working on a soil health initiative for the past 7 months. And Bob is going to come over to Maui. Like I said, we're going to video shoot at Bobby Paia's farm. Then we're going to go over to Mahi Pono. And they've come forward and put up that they're going to do 200 acres of a demonstration that we're getting Bob to develop a program around that we can then move forward to demonstrate the importance of soil health and what happens when you apply protocols to your soils that Bob will speak about tonight. So without further ado, please welcome warmly my dear friend, Bob Schaefer, who lives in Honaunau on the Big Island. His farm is there and up Middle Ke'e Road. Bob, aloha, brother.
Aloha, Vince. Aloha, everybody. Well, thanks for being here tonight. I know it's dinner time, and so these meetings are always special. So as Vince was noting, we've been talking about soil health here in Hawaii for going on 20 years now. Ma'a, Aloha Aina, providing education and much great food over the years at conferences, talking about soil health because of the core importance of the soil to our health and to farming. And so we were hoping today that we could talk about soil health, but we would like you to bring your questions. And in particular, are there any aspects of soil health that are special to us here in Hawaii or special to our soils in Hawaii that might be a little different on the mainland or in other places, or we could divide it up and say tropical soils or temperate soils. Is there anything about our soils or about your soil that is particular in its needs of soil health that you'd like to talk about? And so we open up the floor immediately to questions and to try to address the things that would give you the best information possible about your soils, in particular here in Hawaii. But while questions come, or if you have them now, that's okay. We can start. Vincent has some images that he'd like to show tonight that we can relate back to how soil health is affecting our crops. So what is soil health? I typically, I'm a farmer and I work with farmers as a consultant, and farmers are very, very smart, oftentimes correctly, very simple people. And soil health to me is easiest to understand if we relate to the soil as we relate to our health. We know how healthy we are. We can feel it. We can tell whether we're gaining in health or losing in health if we pay attention. The same thing applies to the soil. The soil has not a permanent state of health, but has degrees and has cycles of health that it goes through. As farmers, we can very much influence the biology, the chemistry, and the physics of soil, and thereby affecting the soil's health. So I guess it's good to say that I'm only a farmer. I only work with farming soils. I don't work with other types of soils. And so in this discussion about soil health, we're talking about farming soils. So a little bit of definition. Again, I like to relate to soil health as I relate to my own health, and that when I'm strong and I'm healthy, I'm productive every day. I may work hard every day, but by rest, the next day I'm working hard again. It's the sustainability of health that we're really looking for in the soil. We have to ask so much of the soils each day throughout year after year to produce that it makes sense that we have to do some things for the soil to keep it in its best state. Myself, as an agronomist, as a consultant for farmers, what I feel is the responsibility to help growers to grow the best crop that they can. That's why I'm interested in soil health. Down over through the years, I've learned that the best way for me to help someone to produce more crop and good quality crops on their land is to use a strategy that the health of soil can be influenced. And if we bring up the level of the health of soil, it's going to influence the quality and the yield and the sustainability of the crops the farmer's growing. So it's the capacity of the soil to function as a vital living system within our farm and to sustain the plants and the animals and to provide services that are beyond just the sustaining of plants and animals by their food, but to provide services for the soil, such as filtering of water, the prevention of erosion by covering the soil surface. That is at the heart of soil health. So there are some things about tropical soils that are different than temperate soils. If we could generalize and say that our tropical environment here is not contiguous across the islands. Our islands vary in age, they vary a little bit in weather. And so we do have some site-specific issues on our own island, on our own farms. But in general, in Hawaii, in subtropical soils, we have high temperatures. The temperatures in the soil are relatively high compared to most temperate areas. And it's in this temperature of the soil and in the moisture that we have. Hawaii is blessed in general with a lot of moisture, or at least with adequate moisture. So both with moisture and temperature, there is the potential to lose carbon very quickly from soils, especially us as farmers in our need to maybe till a little bit. We'll talk a little bit about tillage tonight. In our need to till and our need to manipulate soils, there is great opportunity for loss of carbon in that tillage. Now, in tropical soils, because of the moisture content, but mostly because of temperature, we can lose carbon very easily. if soil organic matter is at the heart of the health of soil, which it is, because if we look at soil health, I tend to view soil health as both the non-living components of soil, the minerals, the structure of soil, all the components, physical components of soil, but also particularly the life forms in soil, the bacteria, the fungi, the nematodes and protozoas, the 9 animals on the soil surface, both of them in a symbiosis to provide nutrients to the plant, to provide services such as decomposition, the prevention of diseases, the enhancement of growth to the plant, the breakdown of toxins in soil provided by bacteria and fungi, the aggregation of soil that provides good structure for our soil so plants can grow well, are all services provided by the soil. So in terms of carbon, because if we can feed carbon to the soil through the organic matter that we return, then we're feeding the bacteria and fungi that produce the 7 services that I just mentioned. Those 7 services by bacteria and fungi are had by feeding the soil carbon, organic matter. There's about 50% roughly carbon in organic matter. So when I'm returning decomposing roots, compost, cover crop residues, 50% of that material that I do get into the soil can yield carbon, feed the bacteria and fungi, and produce 7 benefits or 7 services that promote and maintain the health of soil. In our tropical regions, again, the loss of carbon can be tremendous. One of the things that's went on in Hawaii and on the mainland and all around the world also, but here in Hawaii, we've had very intensive farming on the same fields, sometimes 100 and more years. And during that farming practice, there could have been the overlooking of the replacement of organic matter, the imbalancing of nutrients. So in Hawaii, both in Maui on the Big Island and Kauai, we're inheriting soils that have been long farmed and imbalanced, especially in terms of carbon. And so the health of those soils has been compromised, and we can improve upon that just by knowing that we're vulnerable to soil carbon loss here, very much so, by our heat, and we need to replace these things quite a bit, very frequently. When I first came to Hawaii, I wanted to know what made things grow well here. I spent a year, maybe 2 years, talking to farmers when I first came in 1994, asking them this question: what makes plants grow well here? And almost every farmer I talked to told me adding more organic matter. And in 1994, before I started to study these soils, it seemed counterintuitive. The soil organic matter levels were already reading well up over 5, which is not that great here. Some of them 6 and 7. And I couldn't understand why adding more carbon would be effective here in Hawaii, but it's because of our potential of loss. Both the long-term farming, the potential for loss of carbon because of our environment are 2 major factors that we need to guard against to maintain the health of our soils here in Hawaii. The other thing that I'm particularly concerned about on my clients and on my farm and farms that I work with is the materials, the parent material that our soils were developed from. Here on Hawaii Island, for example, I live on the southwest slope of Mauna Loa. We farm on Mauna Loa soils. Mauna Loa extruded or vulcanized basalt, theolitic basalt as it's called, out onto the ground as magma. It broke down, decomposed, and became our soils, along with organic matter, bacteria, and fungi. In the theolitic basalt that these soils form from, there's a mineral called olivine. Olivine has been studied, and there's some great recent papers on olivine proving what we knew from soil analysis, which was there isn't very much potassium in the magma, in the lava, or in the crystals of olivine that are in the lava that came from Mauna Loa. So where are we to get our potassium if it wasn't in the parent material? This is a real problem in Hawaii. As far back as the early 1900s, the sugar growers in Hawaii were noticing that where their potassium levels were falling, there is some parent material. There is some potassium in our soils from parent material, but not very much. I typically read 1 or 2% base saturation percentage of potassium in our soils if it hasn't been added. Now, I'm sort of belaboring this point maybe on potassium because potassium is so important for the plant's health, for preventing disease, for maintaining quality in plants. Potassium is extremely important and it's very low in our soils. So if we don't understand that we're going to need to replace this potassium into the soils before we can get it to recycle through our crops, then we would experience what the sugarcane growers experienced in the early 1900s, which they were watching their sugarcane yields drop and their sugar levels drop at the same time as the potassium levels were dropping in the soil. I think it was around 1930 or so, in 1940, that the Sugarcane Association went to the mainland and with chemists developed potassium chloride in a granular form that they could bring back to Hawaii Island and throw onto our sugarcane fields and to Maui too by airplane, correcting the potassium levels, bringing the sugar back up and the growth of the plant in a more healthy way with corrected potassium levels. Now, we take soil analysis, we see what's missing in our soils, and we replace those minerals. I don't like to import minerals into Hawaii, but there are some minerals such as potassium and boron that aren't in our parent material. And if we don't know to replace them, then we will suffer a lack of soil health in those soils without those minerals. I want to pause a minute now before we go any further into any of the differences between typical soils and soils here in Hawaii in regards to their health, and just see if there's questions or comments or anything you'd like to talk about.
Hey, Bobby. Yeah, there are a few questions. I just wanted to touch on what you're talking about, because a lot of people, when it comes to growing here in Hawaii, a mutual brother of ours, Jerry Brunetti, used to say at Body and Soil conferences, he used to say that, we don't have the older European soils here to grow the European plants, and that a lot of people eat. And that's why, one of the issues with consistent production, we find here that it's really a challenge to people say, don't bring anything in, let's just use all that we have here. So like you're pointing out, some of the parent material, because it's younger, could you just speak to that a little bit more in the sense that people could better understand that when we're talking about producing food that a lot of people eat, the cucurbits, the brassicas, all the European style plants, it's a challenge, and in order to get that balance that you're talking about, right?
It is. I grew up loving farming, and then I realized how naive that was at a point in my life, because farming, as it's been practiced, at least in part, has been so destructive to the environment, so destructive to the quality of food, that I was shocked at that point in my life to love farming so much and to see that we might be better off as hunter-gatherers because of the damage that we've done by farming. However, this is our chance. We as a group of people have learned, we as a certain group of farmers have learned that we need to diversify our farming operations, aim towards health. And if I need to import a little bit of minerals into a farming system to support our health, then I don't feel bad about doing that. Now, we need to be careful about what we import and how we use it. Potassium is recyclable. Once that you get potassium, and you can get it, okay, so you can burn banana peels. I'm okay with that. It depends on the size and depends on how many banana peels you have to burn. We can use kelp for potassium. But when you analyze some soils and they're 300 or 500 pounds or more deficient in potassium, and when you analyze the crop growing on that soil and it doesn't have much potassium in it, then I'm concerned to get potassium into the plant, and I'll import it in a more concentrated forms. Now, typically, I'm buying potassium sulfate from the Great Salt Lake. It's a long ways away. It's an evaporate. It's called mining, but it's really evaporating salts that come up to the surface. And if we use those materials judiciously, balanced with calcium, balanced with magnesium, which is a mandate in farming, we must balance our calcium, magnesium, potassium, or face the crises that causes otherwise, then we can recirculate that potassium and use it many, many times over while we build the infrastructure of good organic matter and other physical character of the soil to support our crops.
Bob, with that said, I want to preface this that everybody, Bob's an organic farmer, has been, how long have you been? 30, 40 years an organic farmer, composter, knows all about the subtleties of growing organic. I'm an organic farmer. Yet when we talk about farming, like Bob said, it's kind of an unnatural. You don't see, cropping systems out in nature naturally like what we do. So it really requires having the person who's looking at your soils, knowing seeing what he's looking at, and being able to address each elemental in a way that those plants will do their best, right, Bob? So there are some questions here, though, and if you have anything more you want to say to that, great. And otherwise, we can go on to the questions.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so James Weir said, I just moved from California back to Honolulu. This is real basic, but what are the simple factors to consider or the ways to research Oahu foothills soil? It's a pretty wet place.
So if I understand the question, right, you want to know more about the soils that you're living on or that your farm's on. The NRCS has a lot of information and can show you both topo maps and soil, the classification of the soils in that area. There are soil maps here in Hawaii and in each state in the US that will show you what the types of soils are that you're looking at. That will give you a lot of information. And then make sure that you talk to your immediate neighbors, people who are farmers in the immediate neighborhood and in your area, and find out what they know about their soils. This is oftentimes some of the very best information because there's people probably working with that soil for a long time right in your area. That would be my 2 starting points.
That's great, Bob. And then he says he's just started using EM1 and EM Bokashi process. I know Kat Baber is going to be speaking to this at the last Wednesday of these presentations. Any thoughts or info?
Yeah, Bokashis are really interesting stuff. So look, farming is a big topic. Let me help you to organize your work and your analysis of what you're doing into 3 groups. If you look at a farm, or if you look at your own practices, or if you're trying to figure out what should I do to my soil, this is in regards to soil management, there's 3 groups of practices. 1, organic matter management. Now, Bokashi would fit under organic matter management. It's a type of a inoculant, composty-like material loaded with microbes, has some influences on the crop, has some influences on the soil potentially. It's an organic matter management technique. So lump that under OM management. Then you've got nutrient management, meaning those things that aren't organic matter. They're nutrients, they're minerals in the soil to manage. And then I have the concerns of tillage, whether I'm using a shovel or a tractor or a ripper or whatever it is, I have tillage. So I'm saying that you can consider your soils as being manageable by its organic matter inputs, manageable by its nutrient inputs, or managed by its tillage inputs. So Bokashi fits under organic matter management. It's a nice input. Under organic matter management, I want to use cover crops, I want to use compost, and I want to use mulches. And however you want to fit Bokashi into that's okay with me. But I would be looking for, where's my diverse cover crop? How am I managing it? Cover crops are great. They work, but they don't work if you just plant them and walk away from them. You have to manage them. So I'm looking for cover crop, I'm looking for compost, and I'm looking for mulch under that organic matter category. Under nutrients, I'm looking for soil analysis, balancing nutrients, correct forms of nutrients. And under tillage, I'm looking for an examination of the soil profile, backhoe pits. I'm looking at earthworms. I'm looking at taprooted plants. I'm looking at appropriate tillage equipment.
Beautiful. And Bob, there's a question about, do you know how the first settlers on island corrected potassium deficiencies? Because you're saying that, you know, it's a limiting factor here in Hawaii. I mean, a lot of the canoe plants basically adapted, yeah, to the soils here in a way that that they were able to thrive and as they are today when where they're grown, right? More of the indigenous and endemic plants. What is your thoughts around that question there as far as K deficiencies?
It's a great question. It's a great question. So if we can say that back when the Hawaiians first found Hawaii, I believe that what I've read is that there were a lot of birds here. And we can picture that these forested islands with dense ancient bird populations probably had a more active potassium level in the top 4 inches of soil than we could ever dream of. Remember, potassium leaches. Now I'm going to speak mostly from, I'm sitting on the Big Island tonight. I know the other islands, but I'm going to talk about our soils here. And we have a lot of coarse soils. Potassium will leach in coarse soils. So as the new folks came and as time passed and the trees were cut, the organic matter was lost and the birds were killed and their populations lowered, the potassium levels started to drop. It's not coming out of the lava, but it was recycled through bird manure because the birds are recycling the insects, they're concentrating the potassium, they're putting in their manure. Also, the Hawaiians were smart folks and they brought kelp from the sea, they were burning bones, and they were composting fish waste and animal waste and applying it to their lands. I don't mean to be arrogant, but I know they were, because that's what all of us do when we start to farm and we see what happens when we recycle our food scraps back towards the soil. It works. It makes for great crops and better soil. Native American people, Native people everywhere over the world would bring these resources, and maybe even some of the crop cultivars of taro, banana, and other things at that time were more tolerant than our current cultivars are of lower potassium levels. And certainly we would have had superior mycorrhizae and other free living bacteriums and fungi that would have supported both the decomposition of mineral potassium and the delivery of potassium to the plant. I think that we're farming soils that have been damaged. I think we're farming soils that derive from parent material without potassium. And I've never been able to use compost in this island or in Maui or Kauai to bring the potassium levels up significantly. Phosphorus, yes, potassium, not. And if it's below 4 or 5%, I'm going to buy some and add it and gain the quality of the crop from that.
Because, you know, when you're talking about not having enough potassium, it's the what is the element? I know what zinc is opposite to phosphorus. What is the element opposite to potassium? So if you're high in one, lower in the other, you know, there's that relationship, right?
There is, and so the relationship you're referring to is typically referred to as antagonism.
Right.
In soil science. It's kind of hard to find. It's been known about for a long time, but typically farmers and fertilizer people don't talk about it. Potassium, calcium, and magnesium are in constant antagonism to each other. One goes up, the other one goes down. You can't stop it from happening. I've tried. You can slow it down with organic matter. You can slow it down with balance. Once you get potassium, calcium, magnesium to relative balance to each other with good soil organic matter and carbon being added, yeah, I can see some stability. But oftentimes in our soils here on the Big Island and on the soils in Maui and the soils in Kauai, certainly the soils I dealt with for 30 years in California extensively, high magnesium depresses potassium and calcium very well. And to defeat that magnesium, you need to get calcium higher. A lot of times the pH of the soil is reading 6.5 under really high magnesium, low calcium, and low potassium. And like when I started working on rice crops, we can grow rice here. Rice is a good crop for Hawaii. I'm not inferring that we grow 50,000 acres of rice, but we should have some rice growing here. When I started working in rice in California, the magnesium was so high, the pH was 7, and no one would apply calcium. We got great results from using calcium to depress the effects of magnesium. And when we did that, the potassium levels came up. They enjoyed better disease prevention, and we bought less potassium. So that's one way to avoid buying potassium, is to manage your magnesium. How do we know what these are? You have to do soil tests. And frankly, getting soil tests is kind of like learning to play chess. It's not very good at first. There's a lot of different moves. There's some things to learn. So if you go to get soil tests, make sure you go to a lab that has agronomists that will tell you, quote unquote, what to do. And the
Well,
other
Bob,
thing I'd say about soil
that's
tests-
part of the question, but too, people are asking, where do we get a good soil test on the mainland? I know here, we're talking, if you want to share about CEC, so people understand that I know when we had soil tests coming out of the University of Hawaii in the early days, it's different now with Susan Crow there at CTAR, but before, you couldn't get a CEC test out of Hawaii. Could you explain about a CEC test so people can better understand how to where to go to get a proper CEC test, and what is CEC, and why would you want to get that anyhow?
So to answer both questions, first off, I feel confident sending you to A&L Lab. A is in Apple, L is in Lucy. A&L Labs are a national lab on the mainland. Here in Hawaii, I work with the Modesto Lab. I've worked with the Modesto Lab for 20 years. I've known 3 different agronomists there, and it's a good solid lab. They do the cation exchange capacity testing, which any commercial lab in the United States will do CEC, or what's called cation exchange capacity testing, for you. It's pretty much standard now. On A&L's test, if you get I believe it's the S1 package, there's different groups of analysis that you can get. You'll get the cation exchange capacity test for calcium, magnesium, potassium, and sodium. That's the 4 positive charged alkaline nutrients in soil. It's the only 4 of bulk. The idea of this analysis is to get a better view of what we need to do to soil to gain the benefits of good aggregation, to gain the benefits of nutrient release by managing the calcium, magnesium, potassium, and sodium, because of the strong influence on those 4 nutrients on the physics, chemistry, and biology of the soil. Calcium, magnesium, potassium, and sodium. Well, let's leave the sodium off for the moment. Calcium, magnesium, potassium. They're found in large volumes in the soil. They leach, some of them leach, some of them are exported. These are the 3 that I need to work with to get in the sweet spot to where bacteria and fungi can have enough air spaces in the soil from good aggregation. Show me a soil that has inverted ratios of calcium to magnesium that has good soil structure. Really hard to find. I haven't found any when you examine them closely. Show me soils that have good ratios of calcium to magnesium, and I'll show you some well-structured soils generally. Now, you can ruin any of those things that I just said or enhance them. Agronomy is tricky business, but for the most part, a cation exchange capacity test is a standard test. They're not expensive. They were developed in the 1920s by Dr. Albrecht at the University of Missouri. He worked for 25 years or 30 years with the Germans, of all folks, to understand how to better analyze calcium, magnesium, potassium, so we could correct those nutrients to where they are in balance and to where they're not acting antagonistic to each other. The whole object of this is to get calcium, magnesium, potassium into a relative balance with each other that will agree with aggregation, agree with good soil health, and agree with delivery of nutrients in available forms to the plant.
So Bob, that's great, man. And I know there's so much to cover with this. One of the questions that's coming in is talking about drought. And, I know in my farm here, in our, 27-year-old compost that we use on our farm, when it rains and it rains heavy and we have a big saturation, I notice it never gets muddy. I noticed that because of the humic structures in that, it only accepts so much water, and then the water then releases. In other words, it doesn't hold on to so much that it gets muddy. And I would think, like what you talked about in the beginning of your presentation here about how having proper carbon in the soil would, in other words, be able to be your best mitigator, yes, in drought situations, because the person, it's our friend Mario, is asking, what is the effect of prolonged drought or lack of irrigation on the soil in the long run? So, I mean, we're talking about carbon too, though. How much carbon's in the soil, right? Would be something to look at in that respect to be able to answer that too, right?
Sure, absolutely. And of course, remember that so when we say soil organic matter, that's the organic matter in the soil, and that's about 50% carbon. There's about 50% actual carbon in organic matter. So the drought question is really interesting and really important. So let's divide this up into the plant and the soil. Since we started with the soil talking about carbon, let's do the soil first. Yes, we want to have roots in soil. It's counterintuitive, really, in a way, to say, okay, I'm in droughty weather. I don't have much water, but he's saying to have roots. So cover crop plants in general, their first reaction to drought, when a plant understands through its contact with roots in the soil that it's low in water, one of the first reactions that a plant has is to put more exudation out through the roots. This is very counterintuitive. It's pretty well represented in soil science and in botany. The plant responds to drought by putting out more carbon. So the microbes then respond by making tiny more amounts of polysaccharides around the roots, which protects them against drought stress. So the plant reacts to drought by putting more carbon in the soil. So I want plenty of roots in the soil. I want to mow my cover crops during drought, so I'm not transpiring so much water. The roots will respond to mowing by even putting out more carbon because you've told them that that's what they need to do. I want to make sure that my soils are mulched. We want mulch on the surface if we're trying to protect evapotranspiration from the soil. And I want to make sure that I have corrected my zinc level, my potassium level, and my calcium levels in the soil before I get into drought. Now let's switch up to the plant. The plant really needs to have adequate levels of zinc and adequate levels of potassium to protect itself against drought. Zinc is called the poor farmer's plumbing. If you don't have irrigation onto your land, you better have zinc in your plant, because zinc and potassium have everything to do with making drought stress less stressful, or making low water conditions less stressful in the plant, and moving things around in the plant when there's maybe not enough water. So both by applications you make to the plant, applications you make to the soil, you can avoid some of the stress of drought.
And so here, Bob, so you see in the picture behind me, right? You see the picture behind me. Speak to that and just what you just shared, because this was rolled and crimped. This was tropical sun hemp, rolled and crimped. And you're talking about, getting roots in the soil. You're talking about not disturbing the soil. Could you just speak to what you're seeing here?
Yes, I will. That's a great shot. And I do this type of I do this type of technique, and I'll comment on it. But before I do that, I just wanted to add one thing, that when your plants are in drought, I work with a lot of droughty plants in California in the years that I worked in California because of our environment there. Yucca extract. The extract of the yucca plant has saponins and has proteins in it that when the plant uptakes these, you can spray it on as a foliar, you can add it to its roots. And the protein uptake signals the plant into drought tolerance. Also, you can use what's called Kilea saponaria. It's the soapbark tree from Chile. You can buy it through a company called Desert King. It's Kilea saponaria. It's a beautiful material to use for, particularly for perennial trees, if you're expecting to be suffering drought. So the image behind Vince looks like sun hemp to me. It's been grown up to what we typically call the succulent stage, which is where you're always told to green manure it or take it down. That's fine. There's another side to that story. But so we've come through, looks to me like with a flail mower.
No, roller crimper. Roller crimper.
Okay, so this has been roller crimped. Yeah, okay, so it's laying forward. So a lot of different plants can be used for this. In California, I use bell beans for this purpose because I'll plant the bell bean in the fall, grow it through the winter. It's a tall, upright legume. And then I'll lay it down in the springtime. We'll use a roller crimper. We've used just tires drug behind the tractor, actually, in the early years, just to lay it forward. And then I would drive on it. We wouldn't plant it, but we would just drive on it. So we'd use it for a live mulch, which would turn into a dead mulch. So yeah, this is a great technique. So I can come into this now and just drive on it, or I can come into it and transplant plants into it. What I like to do with that strip is I like to come and throw small seed into it and grow another crop up through it. Why? As a consultant, I encourage you all to become ag consultants. It's a great way to learn about farming. I'm given lands that basically won't produce anything. They don't give you your good pieces of land. They give me pieces of land. They go, this isn't growing anything. And I go, okay, I need 2 years. And they go, no, you can't have 2 years. You can have 2 weeks. Well, I need 2 years typically because this land's been farmed for 50 years and it's run down. I can't get enough organic matter in it. I can't get water in it. I can't even get a plow through it. So I want to come to this, put a sun hemp in. There's a article online. I'll get this article to Vincent after this presentation so you can read my description of what I'm going to tell you that was printed about 10 years ago. So I can take this sun hemp and I can do the roll down when it's green. That's fine. That's a great technique. I can also take this sun hemp and let it go to completely brown standing. Don't try mowing it while it's just starting into that brown process, as it's very tough. But later, when it becomes completely dry and just shattered, I can mow it down with a strong mower. Now I've got lignin. Rather than having just cellulose and hemicellulose in this tissue laying on the ground, I want to get that tissue over to lignin. Once I get it to lignin, it's going to stay on the ground a lot longer, and it's going to feed back. It's going to feed fungi instead of bacteria. Now what I did in preparation for planting ginger that had root knot nematode and other pathogens in the soil. So I planted the sun hemp as a non-host crop for plant parasitic nematode. I let it go to complete maturity. Bob, who was the sun hemp expert, I can't think of his last name, Bob Joy from Molokai, came out to this demonstration that I was giving. And from 300 or 400 yards away, he started scolding me that you've let that sun hemp go too far, it's too brown, and now it's too brown and we're not gonna be able to push it down. So I showed everybody that by having it lignified, now I can push it down. And then I came and applied, sowed really fine, small, what's called a fodder radish. It's a type of oilseed radish that again is not host to plant parasitic nematodes, and actually it can be used as a biofumigant. So I threw that seed into the dried sun hemp residue, let the radish come up, and then mowed that to the ground and let it sit. And then we went in and just slipped ginger into it. So I had minimum soil disturbance we had 2 cover crops that were non-host. And we had the first cover crop in a stage where it was supporting fungi, which would further attack the plant parasitic nematode in the soil. That crop did very well after that treatment. And so I love sun hemp. I love the roll down technique. There's a number of ways to manipulate it the way that you need to have it.
Well, Bob, and thank you for that. You know, we're going to be on Maui. You're going to be on Maui next Tuesday, and we're going to go to Bobby Paia's farm. We're going to roll down that cover crop. Mario will be there that morning, and we're gonna roll and crimp it, and then we're going to dig a backhoe trench right next to it, so you guys can have at it and talk about what you're seeing there. It's very exciting to me that you know, the more we do practices that add more organic matter to the soil, how these soils in Hawaii respond.
Oh, very much so. The correction of the things that I see most here is pretty much straight across the islands is on the old farmlands, old cane land or old pine land, are compaction issues, water rejection or not infiltrating water well issues, low soil organic matter, low calcium. Those 2 things very much related. I'm not going to get this soil organic matter corrected without getting headed towards calcium corrected because of the low biomass production, really low phosphate. I started working in Australia about 12 years ago. I've worked there quite extensively, actually, through the graces of soil care and Bayer Ag Sciences. And the Australians, when I first came there, they thought, oh boy, we're going to have a good time with Bob because he won't understand our fixed phosphate in Australia. They didn't realize I've been working in Hawaii and California with the red soils that fix our phosphate. So I find really low phosphate levels here. They can be corrected quite a bit by compost, by mulch, and by improving the calcium levels. It's counterintuitive.
Bobby, excuse me, but when you talk fixed, just so for the folks here that may not understand what that means, you know, it's not available, right? It's not available for the plant roots to pick up. Is that how you're referencing fixed?
Yes, the term fixed in soil science means we're referring to a nutrient that has not been fixed. It wasn't broken and we fixed it. It's fixed into the structure of the soil where it can't get back out. The roots go in, they can't get it out. We can't get those nutrients out that are in fixed forms. Phosphate has 5 forms that it's fixed into. Potassium has several forms that could be considered fixed. It's just these forms that are difficult to get plant root access to them. Again, if the potassium's at low levels, it may still be in fixed forms or just in difficult forms to access, but we'll have to add it. With phosphate, I usually don't start adding it very vigorously until I start using enough compost to get it to come up because phosphate's expensive. So yes, fixed forms are the challenge across red soils all around the world. And here again, what I typically see in our soils as a constant pattern are low soil organic matter, compaction, low calcium, low potassium, low boron, and high magnesium. These are consistent findings. And by correcting those, the organic matter that you can raise, the volume organic matter considerably increases. Now we start to get some performance because I can get more roots in the soil, I can get better structure in the soil, and I can get production on top that we can use as mulch and or food plants.
So Bobby, what do you see in this picture? What does that speak to you as?
Well, this is a very dark material. I always like to tease people about the color of this. And so what would you say? Is that a compost or
it's
is that charcoal?
Earthworm castings.
Earthworm castings. Have they been fed a lot of charcoal?
Yeah, there's biochar in there, yeah.
Yeah, because of course we may be getting color not quite corrected here on the screen tonight, but that's more the color of charcoal than it is the color of humus. So humus is the color of about an 85% or maybe 87% chocolate. It's dark brown. The wavelength that humic acids vibrate at, the polymetric material that we call humus, is dark brown. This is black. When I see compost, people will bring me compost that are jet black. My first comment usually is, you burned that compost. And they go, how did you know that you burned the compost? And you go, well, it's because it's black. It's like toast. When I burn my toast, it's black. When compost is well made, it's not burned, it's dark brown because of the humus content being 20 to 50%. You know, we can't really measure humus. I did a study in Australia with the Southern Cross University and their excellent soil science department and the science department from Bear Ag Sciences. We studied a lot of labs in the world, interviewed them. There is a lab in Italy that we believe actually can measure humus. It costs you more than a Maserati. They don't offer it as a public service, and it's only a research lab, but we're not convinced at all that there is any other labs in the world that are actually measuring humus. Remember, humus doesn't have a chemical formula. It's an amorphous material only produced in aggregates and in soil, and we really don't know what it is, and we don't measure it very well. But look, again, at the end of the day, we're farmers. Manage your organic matter, manage your nutrients, manage your tillage, be applying copious amounts of our beautiful legumes that we grow here in Hawaii, our beautiful C4 grasses, and compost that we can build, bokashi that we can apply. Get your calcium levels corrected, use mulches, and minimize your tillage to, beneficial practices or beneficial disturbance. Try to use earthworms as your tillage and taprooted plants, and you'll see the power of Hawaii's soils. It's here. They do regenerate very well, and those are the core things to concentrate on in the early years. So
And that'll give us more humus then in our soils. So then you would agree that we all need to have more of a sense of humus, right?
a sense of humus for sure.
Right on. And Bob, let me see, we got about 5 minutes left. Let me see. Korean natural farming is a no-till system. Once the soil food web has been restored, we only disturb the top 6 inches, so the mycelial network remains intact. There's a statement. Can guinea grass be used like sun hemp to let it go to lignin before pushing it down?
Guinea grass will remember that all the grasses, all plants have lignified roots. Greatest degree of lignification normally in the plant is in the seed or in the roots. Guinea grass has a fair amount of lignification in its stems. If you're going to lignify them that far with a big grass like guinea, it get a little challenging sometimes because of the aggressive nature of guinea. I like guinea grass. Guinea grass, if you study guinea grass, you'll find that it has a tremendous population of PGPR on its roots, plant growth promoting rhizobacteria. That's one of the reasons guinea grass, colonial guinea grass, the C4 grass from Kenya that was brought here to feed cows. It's one of the reasons it's so popular around the world is because it grows very well because of its association with plant growth promoting rhizobacteria. If you say to me, Korean natural farming system, that's a great stuff, but that it's a no-till system except for the top 6 inches. Well, wait a minute. Well, you have a tillage system in the top 6 inches, you are affecting mycorrhizae. The mycorrhizae are in the top 6 inches. I'm not saying not to till, but maybe I didn't understand that comment.
Yeah, I didn't quite understand it either. But as we all know, the rhizosphere, the top 7 inches is where all life is, right? That's where fence posts rot. And that's where we find our biology, a majority of our aerobic biology. So, Bobby, there's a question earlier that said about, I missed, it said, when you were talking about potassium and boron, they're limited. What are good crops to do well with limited potassium and boron? Is there any things that you could suggest?
You're asking the wrong farmer that question.
Right on, right on. And so,
I'm not in favor of growing mineral deficient plants, and
right
I haven't found a way to get. Look, boron leaches. You know what? I've got systems now that we've been feeding for 10 years. They don't require any nutrients except some protein. I feed them some protein for nitrogen or for protein.
Mm-hmm.
Sulfur and boron. Sulfur and boron leach and even in good soil organic matter soils. And it looks to me like what's happening is the microbes, the plant, the life forms in soil are so much enjoying copious amounts of boron being fed to them and copious amounts of sulfur that they're incorporating it and using it. I find that the only things I buy in 10-year well-managed systems are some protein, a little boron, and a little sulfur. Yeah,
Well,
we're
it's-
making compost, we're making other stuff and applying it, but
Right.
yeah.
And so like, would you please people understand that emphasizing a little boron, a little sulfur, because, boron can really burn, there's a lot of issues with too much boron, right? It's a trace. Can
I've
be
watched it.
considered a micronutrient or a trace element? What would you consider boron?
It's a micronutrient. It's essential micronutrient. I watched the Australian macadamia experts, which I've worked with for years now, thousands of acres of macadamia, 3 and 4% boron in their soils with good calcium levels.
Wow.
They've doubled their yields. I have 2 macadamia growers that I've worked with in Australia. Both of them have received the Grower of the Year national awards because of the low volume of rejects in their nut once they corrected their calcium and their boron levels in the soil. That's not to say they don't correct phosphate and potassium and blah, blah, blah. But boron, the more you read about boron for yourself and for your plants and for your soil, you'll become addicted to boron.
Well, Bobby, let's help the people here too with the closing comments on calcium. You speak so much about calcium. I know, being that we cut our teeth in a lot of presenters from Acres USA and Dr. Albrecht's work on calcium saturation in soils. There's 3 forms, right? There's 3 major forms. We got gypsum, which is calcium sulfate, and dolomite, which is calcium magnesium, and then calcium carbonate, right? Could you please share with people when to use these particular forms of calcium as just kind of a snapshot?
Well, yeah, okay. So well stated. 3 forms, those 3 forms of calcium: sulfate, dolomite, which is dolomitic, which is magnesium carbonate, and calcium carbonate. So the simple answer is use dolomite when you need magnesium. It contains magnesium and calcium. Use calcium carbonate when you need a lot of calcium in your soil to elevate that. Don't use either of those without a soil test. Don't use either. I spend a lot of times trying to help farmers correct soils where they've guessed about those inputs. You can't taste it and guess. You can't, dream it up and guess. Do a soil analysis from A&L that'll really pay you. And use gypsum, calcium sulfate, when you both need just a little bit of calcium and when you can use a little sulfur. A little sulfate form sulfur is really good. Gypsum is an extremely handy material. It's a fairly somewhat dissolvable or available form of calcium. Doesn't take it too long to break down. Has a good effect on soils of elevating the potassium availability. Has a good effect on soils of helping to lower magnesium if the calcium levels are pretty high, but yet the magnesium levels are still too high. So again, I would answer this by saying I use these forms according to what I need or what I don't want to have more of in the soil. And I base it off soil analysis. I want to tell you that soil analysis doesn't tell you what to do. It doesn't. And you shouldn't do everything that the soil test tells you to do usually, but it does give you a lot of information to make some better judgments about what to do.
Great. And then Bobby, with the addition of gypsum in rainy areas, why is that? Why is it seen that, when you have high rainfall areas, it would be a good thing to add gypsum? Is it because the sulfur is so soluble that in high rainy areas you're losing a lot of your sulfur, or why would that be that you would use gypsum?
I can't say as I've found that to be something that people have said to me, yeah, we use gypsum because it rains a lot, but gypsum does have sulfate, sulfur. Any anything in agriculture that ends in ATE in minerals means it's the available form. So it has available forms of 17% available sulfur. So for each 1,000 pounds of gypsum I'm applying 170 pounds of available sulfur. That's good. And so I would say if there is an issue in high rainfall areas, it might be on coarse soil. Maybe the calcium is leaching a little, the sulfur is leaching a little. Again, I'd go to the soil analysis and see what my base saturation percentage and poundage of calcium was. Then I would know better which material to use.
Well, right on, brother. Man, this hour went by really fast. As you can see, everybody, this is quite a broad and provocative subject. Bob is going to be coming into Maui, like I said earlier tonight, for those of you who got come in late. He's going to come into Maui next Tuesday, and we're going to go to Bobby Pai'ia's farm and roll and crimp a cover crop that's planted, and we're going to videotape that with Akaku, and then we're going to go to Mahipono and meet with those folks as part of the the statewide soil health initiative that's occurring. We've been working on for the past 7 months. We've used my position on the Board of Agriculture to bring the agricultural sector to the table. And Mahipono has said that they'll put up 200 acres towards demonstrations of these soil health protocols that we're going to be discussing. Bobby's going to develop a plan to go about doing that. And we're going to look to the private sector to help fund that. And hopefully we'll be able to get the kind of traction we're looking for to at that level of demonstration to be able to get these practices more in the general lexicon of agricultural communication here in the state, so we can truly be able to take care of our soils in a way that we can feed the people here in Hawaii with our cropping systems. So this is the work that we're doing within HFUU. We're not charging anything for all these presentations and our convention this year, because we want to be able to reach everyone as best as possible. Since we're not physically getting together, we would love to have been able to get together at Bobby Pai'ia's farm. That's where it was planned to be physically this year. But when you're given lemons, you make lemonade. And so we're bringing forward all these pre-convention presentations. And then during the convention, as you can see at the bottom of this flyer here, we have agroforestry systems of Christopher Nesbitt from Belize, Colombia, is going to be speaking. And Dan Kittredge, who developed the bionutrient produce meter, will be speaking on Friday. And then Ray Archuleta from Kiss the Ground movie on Saturday. And then we're going to have lunch. And then in the afternoon, we're going to have these farm videos below. All these different farms, you're going to see demonstrations from these farms. So we're going to have interactive question and answer with the farmers there. And we're going to have all our chapter presidents in that boardroom on Maui at a retreat center. So we'll be all here together to answer any questions or concerns, or just be able to talk story with us during those 3 days. So we're really excited about this in the sense that we can bring you value for those who value our local agriculture. And please, if the spirit moves you and you have the wherewithal, from $1 to $1 million, you can donate anything you like to your organization to keep our operations going in the coming year. We appreciate every one of you. Appreciate those that are our members. If you would like to be a member, go to hfuu.org. It really helps when we go to legislature, when they ask us how many members we have. So please help support the work of Hawaii Farmers Union United continuing. And Bobby, we love you, brother. You were the best. Looking forward to seeing you on Tuesday, man.
Thank you. Aloha, everybody. Thank you, guys.
Stay positive and test negative, everybody. Thanks for being here tonight. Aloha.